We're continuing in Rabbeinu Yonah, Sif Yud. We've begun the first of the primary steps of Teshuva, which is Charata, which is regret. And we're on page 12. Rabbeinu Yonah has already discussed a few reasons why a person would be in regret, realizing that by not following the advice of the Torah, he has hurt himself. He has caused all kinds of natural consequences to come into his life. He has in his life, and had he followed what the Torah said and lived properly and followed the mitzvahs, he'd be in a better state of life. So he goes on. We're on the fourth line in Sif Yud on page 12 and 13. V'yischaretz al ma'asav, and he should have regret al ma'asav haroim. He should have regret on his evil actions. V'yomer bilvav, and he should say in his heart, Me'asisi, what have I done? Ech lo haya pachad Elokim l'neged einai. How could the fear of God not be before my eyes? V'lo yogorti mitochachos al avon, and they didn't shudder before the rebukes for those who do sin. Umin hashvatim haroim, and from the painful processes that would happen to me for the things I would do wrong. Ki rabim machovim l'rasha, because there's a lot of processes that are there that are necessary to detoxify the rasha. So don't you realize that there's going to be consequences? Lo chamalti al gufi, I did not have compassion on my body. Lo chasa eini alav mishachaso mipnei hanos rega echad, and I didn't have, my eyes didn't have mercy upon my body from its destruction. Why? Because of the cheap delights of the moment of pleasure that I would have. So, what's he saying over here? He's basically saying, how wasn't I scared of this detoxification process that becomes necessary with my activities? We talked about this yesterday. If you don't take care of things, Hashem has to take care of things. So why wasn't I afraid of that? How was I so silly to think that I could do things and that they wouldn't leave any kind of mark that I'm going to have to pay for? How could I have been so foolish to think that way? So he continues, I'm comparable to a person who steals, takes things away from people, does violent things, and eats and stuffs himself and satisfies himself. But V'yodeh knows, but after all is said and done, after eating, after drinking, after the fun, the judge is going to come and really punish me. It says in Proverbs, Orev le'ish lechem shoker. For a person, false bread, let's say stolen bread, could be very tasty. But then the judgment will come and his mouth will be filled with gravel. In other words, he's going to get punished. It's good when it's going down, but it's not good later. Why didn't I think about that? So that I've really hurt my body. In other words, I am going to suffer. Physically, I am going to suffer. Why didn't I think about that? That's the regret. I had a good time, but it's going to come. The judgment day is going to come. My body will suffer. But more than that, I was cruel to my precious soul. So what Rabbeinu Yonah is saying is that the wellspring for charata, for regret, is really just to be able to feel for yourself. For your own physical self-being, your own spiritual self-being. And Hashem endowed me with a wonderful soul, a precious soul, and my crime was that I was cruel to my own potentials and my own opportunities. So, obviously there's emotion here, but it's not merely an emotional experience. Again, this is logic. I had potentials, and how could I be so cruel to destroy those potentials which I had? That's what he's telling us over here. So I had all these wonderful things, but instead, as he goes on, we're turning to the page now. V'nitma'a b'gilulei yitzri, and I have become Thu May through the desire, through the thoughts and premeditations of my desires. Uma ho'ila b'chol kinyaneha imra b'einei Adoneha. And what do I gain from all the possessions, everything I got out of that, if it is seen as bad in the eyes of my master? In other words, what's it all worth if the relationship you value most, meaning that was with Hashem, is unhappy with what you are doing? And how could I have exchanged for a world that is transient? For that, I changed and gave away a world that stays forever, an eternal world. I've given up the eternal world that I could have had for a transient world. Right? In other words, we build up worlds by virtue of our mitzvahs and by virtue of our spiritual growth. Those things don't have an end. They don't have an end. A mitzvah is the will of Hashem. And the will of Hashem is like Hashem. Hashem is eternal. His will is eternal. His relationship with us is eternal. And Hashem says, I wish you to have that if you so desire it by doing what I'm telling you to do. And therefore it continues on after the person dies, because the soul of the person lives on. If the soul of the person lives on, then to the degree that that soul has been developed, is to that degree that the soul lives. So what is the person saying to himself who's having charata? He's saying, even if I couldn't control myself, it was a lousy deal. It was a lousy deal. Here I had something that was, on the one hand, right, delightful, instant, pleasurable, sensuous, but only for today. And it's gone tomorrow. So how could I switch something that is temporary for something that was permanent? Right? So besides all the other things, it was just a terrible deal. Continuing, this is all the things we should be saying to ourselves. How could I have allowed myself to be so much like and compared myself to an animal? And I went after my inclination, kesus kefered ein havin, like a wild animal, like a wild horse. It doesn't understand. And I strayed from the logical way, the way that I should have gone. How could I have acted that way? And behold, the Creator blew into my nostrils a living soul of a wise heart, meaning the ability to understand wisdom with my heart, and with a good intellect to recognize Him and to fear Him, and to have to control my body and all that comes from my body. I had such a precious heart, such a precious soul that's able to control all this. And He gave me that ability. Kasher himshila al shar balechaim shenavdarben, just like Hashem gave first man and me and everyone else. I was born with this ability to rule over all the other animals in the world that don't speak. I was given dominion over the entire world. Why was I given dominion over this entire world? Because Hashem has found me to be so much more special than anything else. I am most precious in Hashem's eyes. So therefore He gives me control of everything in the world. So if He gave me control of everything in the world, He certainly gave me control over my own body. I certainly have control over my own body. So how could I not have controlled that? So just as God gave me the intelligence to control other elements of nature by my intelligence and to build beautiful worlds, so too in my own life, my own personality is a small world. So just like God gave me the ability to be able to channel all the world's energies into the proper direction. So I'm my own little world. And I've got that same obligation to myself in my own little world that I didn't do. So this is continuously harping on these ideas. And after the fact that for this reason he created me, and now it turned out the opposite. I've done the opposite. So, lama li chayim. Why should I be alive? In other words, I lack a purpose of life. What am I living for? I'm not living for the purpose that Hashem created me. Ka'inyan shenemar, as the pasuk says in Mishlei, Adam toa miderech haskel, when a person veers off the path of intellect, bikal refoim yanuach, he will rest in the congregation of the dead people. If you go off the path, you're cutting off your lifeline. And worse than that, ki kemishpat abahema lo asisi, I didn't even do like an animal. I've acted worse than an animal. Ki yada shor kaneh is quoting the verse of the prophet now. Ki yada shor kaneh v'chamor evus balav. Because the ox knows his master and the donkey knows the feeding trough, the one who gives them the feeding trough. Now the animals know their masters, and they understand how they have to heed their masters, because after all, the masters are the hand that feeds them. And that's what the prophet says. Even an animal can recognize and have hakaras hatov to his master and listens to what his master says, because he knows everything comes from the master. Vanilo yadat v'ospanati, and I don't even know that. I didn't even reflect on that. V'shilachti nafshi lachav shemeraneh, and I set myself to go free from its master, to have a free life. So what he's saying over here now is that the human level is a very high level, which gives a person wisdom to understand and to recognize and to come close to Hashem. That's how Hashem built us. Right? So a person might say that God gave me all these great potentials and I didn't use them, but I'm not worse than an animal. And Rabbeinu Yonah is saying, no, that's not true. That's not true at all. Because all living things, everything has a basic recognition of, number one, where their source is, and number two, where they get their food from. So the animal has instinctive ties to its source. The animal understands what its source is. So when a person doesn't use his potentials that Hashem gives him, so he ends off worse off than all the creatures who have less potential. Why? If you don't, these potentials, these talents that Hashem gives us, these are all bridges to Him. These are all enable us to connect to Him. And when we don't follow Him, we tear down those bridges. And then there's no bridge that's left to be connected to Hashem. We can't fall back on the animal instinct. Say, well, I didn't use the higher potentials, at least I have the lower potentials of the animal. And that's not so. As we've quoted many times, that the whole idea of there's different levels of reality. There's different levels of reality. We have the inanimate objects, we have plants, we have animals, and we have humans. Those are the four levels. So we shouldn't make a mistake and think that a plant is an inanimate object that has an extra feature that it grows. That's a mistake. Or that an animal is like a plant, except it has a little bit of a life force in it. And we also shouldn't say that a human being is an animal that also has a few more brains and can talk. That's a big mistake. It's a big mistake. They are all qualitatively different. You can't compare a plant to a rock. Its whole makeup is from beginning to end is different than a rock. Same with an animal towards a plant, and the same thing with a human being towards an animal. It's not an animal plus. It's not a rational animal. A human being is not an animal. That's all there is to it. Not an animal. Not even close to an animal. And therefore what happens? So if you say the first way, then if the higher element doesn't perform to its higher level, then you'd say it falls back to the lower element. So you'd think if a human being is a rational animal and he doesn't act rationally, he'll still act like an animal. Not true. The human being, and how do we see this? We see this, they bring down, the source is, because when any of these things get into a state of disrepair, they become even more repulsive than the things on the levels lower than them. A rock in a state of disrepair, well, I mean, it's already in a state of, right? How can you disrepair a rock? Okay, smash it in half, okay.
Sand.
You know, okay, but it still doesn't really bother people very much. Okay, turn it into sand, okay. Now take a plant, take a tomato, and leave it in your fridge for a year. Okay, you tell me how that fridge is going to smell. Because much more repulsive than a rock that turns into sand. It goes into a greater state of disrepair. Now you think that's bad. Now, how about a dead horse? Right? And then the most repulsive thing is a rotting human being. It's more distasteful than a dead horse. Right? That's the way it is. So in other words, when it falls, even in the physical realms of disrepair, it becomes much more disgusting. So to show you that it's not human being's not an animal plus. And it goes further. I mean, we get a little politically incorrect here, and this, and don't think that a Jew is a non-Jew plus a little bit of Judaism in him. That's not true either. It's not true either. A Jew is qualitatively different than a non-Jew. They may have some similar things, but in the overall DNA, he's not the same being. And therefore, the next step also is true. The Jew who falls into disrepair is much more disgusting than a non-Jew. Than a non-Jew. And that a non-Jew in a state of disrepair. The greater the potentials, the more potential of the destructive nature of its state of disrepair. And the greatest anti-Semites were Jews. The people have wreaked in almost all cases, generally speaking. There's some exceptions here and there. But generally speaking, you suffer more in that when a Jew goes off the path, he's way worse. Why? Because the void that exists. And remember, from a mystical point of view, why is one element higher than other? Because there are higher potentials. When potential is lost, then the opposite of those potentials is greater. On a simple level, you can all understand this. The worst thing in the world, let's say you have some electrical energy. Electrical energy, I think, is more powerful than a horse and buggy. Combustible energy. Let's say a car. A car is a lot better than a horse and buggy, right? But a car, when in the hands of an incompetent person, can do a lot more damage than a horse and buggy, right? Can do a lot more damage when it goes in the wrong direction, right? How about atomic energy? Yeah. It's a lot more powerful than a car, but boy, can that do a lot of destruction, a lot of destruction. So therefore, that's the rule. That's the rule of life. The higher you are up in the chain, the more dangerous it is if you don't use it. And the atomic energy can render the whole world to be totally useless. So now, what is the greatest energy source that exists in the world? Is the Jewish soul. It's come from the highest and most powerful realms. And that's why human beings, and Jews specifically, can destroy more than anything else. So that's what he's saying over here, that I'm not even an animal. If you don't live up to being a Jew, don't think you're only going to be an animal. You know, animals, you know, don't, generally speaking, hurt other people for no reason. Okay, if a lion's hungry, he's going to eat another animal. But for him, it's just dinner. Nothing personal. And there's nothing terrible. It's part of a food chain. And that's the way God wants it. God wants the lion to eat the fox, the rabbit, whatever it is. He wants them to do that. That's part of the ecology that God has put into the world. That's the animal's job. But the lion doesn't get up one day and say, how am I going to torment the people who live in this little city? Yeah, give them a couple of rabbits, give them a deer, I don't know what they eat. They're very happy and they'll sleep the rest of the day. Leave them alone. They're not going to do anything. Animals, pretty much follow the routine. As much as you see all these science fiction thrillers from Hitchcock, the birds and all these things where they're coming to destroy the world and we have to save the world from them. That's a narishkeit. The animals generally, they do their thing. But human beings, whoa, we're so destructive. And that's part of the regret. The regret is, I'm not even an animal. Halavai, I'd be like an animal. I'm worse than an animal. And I have such an intellect, I have such a soul, and if I deny those potentials and I tear down all those bridges that are left to me, that's what makes me somebody special. If that's gone, then I've got nothing. Even the animal at least does its thing. When the lion eats the animal below that, it is maintaining God's world in the way that God wanted it to. Okay, you're going to say it doesn't have free will choice? Fine, but it still does its thing. If the human being doesn't live up to the extra potentials it has, then it doesn't accomplish anything. And it accomplishes worse, and it destroys this world. On a physical level, we see from the pollution and all that, which we destroy, just on a simple physical level, we're destroying our world. Certainly in a spiritual realm, that human beings have brought so much unhappiness. We live in a society. What's made this society so unhappy? Why are there so many people on antidepressants? Why is there so much bitterness? It didn't come from the lions and tigers. It didn't come from Lake Ontario. It came from people. And people have made the world what it is, as miserable as it is. So therefore, we're not even like animals. If animals would be around, it'd be a nice, unpolluted world. At least the world would be an eco-friendly place. Right? And human beings have destroyed that eco-friendliness and that spiritual friendliness and any kind of friendliness. I'm not saying all, but the majority have. So therefore, a person should say to himself, I'm not even as good as the animal. Okay. Where are we now? V'acharei, yeah? No, I did that already. V'od, yeah, I haven't even done that. Yeah, okay, we're almost at the bottom now. Ta'amti tzufi, I've tasted my honey. V'nashisi sofi, and I've forgotten my end. V'gazalti v'chamasti, I have stolen, done violent things. V'aldal bosasti, I've stepped on the poor people. Lo zacharti yom hamevas, I haven't remembered the day of death. Asher lo yasher lifnei nishmasi bilti im gviyasi, which at the end of the day of my death won't be left before my soul except what? My dead corpse on the land. That's it. All I got left, my neshama, my dead corpse, all those things that gave me pleasure and fun, they're not there anymore. So the only thing to deal with at the end of the day is the neshama, and the neshama has been stained and distanced from its creator all this long, and it's not going to be a very good thing. And that's what, it's always good to review this piece from the Piazetzner Rebbe. Let's see, where's the one we want over here? Yeah. Piazetzner Rebbe wrote a small sefer called Sav Zerus, which was his essays on life, that he wrote, his own personal diary. So it's been translated in English. It's called To Heal the Soul. Unfortunately, it's out of print. So, God willing, it'll come back into print one day. But he has a number of essays of feelings that he had, that he put down on paper, lessons of life that he learned. And one of them, it's called in the English, is The Ultimate Deterrent to Sin. Now, so this is obviously better for before you do the sin. But this is what he's saying as well, is what's the deterrent to keep you from your baser natures. So just read this. Short. Some of them are short. This is a short essay. If you ever get a hold of the book To Heal the Soul, it's on page 127. He says, there's no better deterrent with which to rein in your baser urges than the deterrent of your own emotional response. The regret and soul-deep anguish that will torment you after you fall into sin. This is more than sufficient to quiet your urges and to steer clear of any undesirable behavior. But there remains a problem with this. In other words, what he's saying is, if you think about what you've done and you have regret, regret is a very good thing to have. The anguish and the torment after you fall into sin, that should quiet down the urges. And once you've done the sin, that's what we're talking about charata here. So that should help. It should help. But there remains a problem with this. But there's a problem with that. Even at the peak of your regret and anguish, your baser urges are still alive within you. So you may be regretting over here, but you still want to do it. Your body still wants to do it. You're addicted to certain negative behaviors. So on the one hand, you're regretting it and you feel lousy, but on the other hand, as you're regretting it, you still want to do it. Right? Deep down there, inside, they're even then preparing their next plan of mischief. You're regretting it and thinking, where's the next place I can go to have that pleasure? Because of this, the very action you regret will be downplayed in your eyes. And your anguish will be diminished. I mean, how can you really regret it so much if you're still planning on doing it? Right? You'll even become angry at yourself for being upset, and will try to suppress those positive feelings. Say, what am I regretting for? I'm going to be doing this tomorrow. I mean, and that's a tremendous conflict that's created in the person. You're really regretting it badly. It's just terrible. How can I be like an animal? I can be like this. And meanwhile, while you're doing that, you're on the computer, finding the next time you can do this. Right? So you want to suppress those feelings of tshuva. So for this reason, our sages advised, in order to overcome your baser urges. Remember, I said this on Yom Kippur, I believe. I quoted this. Warren Bracha says, remember the day of your death. They are specific in saying the day of your death, and not just your death. It doesn't say remember your death. It says remember the day of your death. Why the day of your death? Because on that day, even before you die, your baser urges terminate. Don't remember the fact you will die. Well, will die, okay. But remember how it's going to feel on the day of your death. The day that you will die. How do you feel on the day that you are dying? Are you then just as excited for those physical pleasures? You're looking at the monitor in the hospital bed as your life is ebbing away from you and you're making plans for the next Avera? Probably not. The day of your death, how do you feel? He says, then, on that day of your death, with these distorting lenses removed, you will see the true repulsiveness of those baser urges. Then the ugliness of those physical desires is going to be so clear to you, because there's no bias anymore. The truth is sinking in. Your entire life will then pass through your memory as if it were just a few hours, full of all your baser behavior. Even the few good things you did throughout your lifetime will pass by almost unnoticed, because there were so few and far between. All you're going to remember is the majority of what you've done, which hasn't been that good. And then, how deep will be your torment. So that's what he's telling you, to visualize that moment in life. But visualize it today. And you would say on the day of your death, and this is like echoing what Rabbi Yonah is saying, why did I do that for no benefit or good reason? Why did I misuse my only lifetime as a descent to unholy depths? My soul will soon fall into the abyss of hell, accompanied by the demonic beings waiting, even now, around my deathbed to receive me. Why didn't I use my lifetime to draw close to God, to turn back to the arms of my Father with a holy and purified soul? That's how you'll feel on the day of death. Then you will want to slash your heart, to lacerate your soul out of anguish. This is deep soul regret. That is why we say, remember the day of your death. Not death, the day of your death. Visualize the day of your death. Walk through it. And it's a good meditation. Not for every day, you'll get depressed.
Yeah.
But in Elul, it's a good thing to we got to get the regret going. It's the first step. Without the first step, and to the degree that you will regret, at least you've got a base from which to work from. The next principle is also an important one. But this, if you don't have the regret, how's anything going to move? But it's got to be a real regret. The real regret. Right? Where am I now? And further, this very base act that you now contemplate. Remember, now we're going back to now, today. Today we're alive with lots of vitality. And we're trying to regret certain averos. And as I'm regretting it, and this is what we have to do in Elul, we got to think, okay, what have I done that's really been bad this year? Right? We've got to at least analyze, I've done something wrong this year, no? If you haven't done anything wrong this year, you're a lucky person. You can have an easy month. If you've done something wrong, so you got to think about it. You've got to have some basis of regret. But he's saying, so now this act right now that you now contemplate. So if you're really thinking of this day of death, the way we're thinking about this, and that's really what Rabbeinu Yonah was saying. How could I do this? But the tzaddik's like putting a lot more teeth into this. Okay, how could I do it? No, but now you are dying. You are dying. And now how would you really feel if you were dying? Now go through the thoughts. Mamish, remember the day of death. Remember it, meaning bring it to your consciousness. Right? Zachor, it's not just remember, put it to your conscious reality. That it mamish, it's here. It's because the truth is, it's not a fantasy. We will all, with God's help, die. If Mashiach doesn't come. Don't rely on it. That's a big Yetzer Hara. One of the biggest Yetzer Haras. Even though we all believe in Mashiach and want Mashiach to come, we really want it to come. But that could be one of the biggest tools of the Yetzer Hara to destroy you, is this hoping for the Mashiach.
But we'll die anyway.
What do I mean to say? You figure, Mashiach's going to come and I won't die. People have these thoughts. The Yetzer Hara has to find a way to take you down. So he's going to say, listen, I'm not so good, but when Mashiach comes, I know what the rabbis want, but I'm not going to die. I'm not going to die. What do you mean you're not going to die? Everybody else is dying. I know, but we're so close to Mashiach. And when Mashiach comes, everything's going to be amazing. All the dead people are going to come to life. Right? Even like the Rambam says, there's a machlokas, what's going to happen to the people who are alive when Mashiach comes? Okay, so the Rambam the Meforsh kind of say, it'll be, the body will be decommissioned in a pleasant way. Even according to those who says, Lutzad, and those who says that when Mashiach comes, everyone will still have to die a little bit to be resurrected, to get to the new body. And it'll be a pleasant death. So people, they think, okay, as long as so you're putting your bets on that you'll make it till Mashiach comes. So first of all, it's not so pashut how many people are going to live through the birth pangs and the throes of the Messianic era, number one. There's a lot of conflicting Talmudic sources. Doesn't sound like a very pleasant time of existence. And it doesn't take much for us to imagine how this can play itself out if Al-Qaeda and Iran and the Taliban had their way, and all their weapons of mass destructions would be unleashed. It wouldn't be hard to visualize how painful the birth throes of the Messianic era would be. All the rabbis in the Talmud said, if it comes, but I don't want to be around when it comes. I don't want to be around when it comes. It ain't going to be an easy time. So I don't know, people have these visions, I'm going to make it through, like you have these big merits, So, you're better off dying before Mashiach comes. But at the big age, I ain't going to die. Well, you know what? You are going to die. And with God's help, you will die. With God's help, you will die. And in His good grace, you will die, because that's the next step of your existence. Right? So we got to kind of like get out of this notion that we're not dying. We are dying, and start looking forward to it. Not tomorrow, at a good old age. But at that good old age, it isn't going to be any less terrifying. If you're a thinking person. You're not a thinking person. The last couple months they drug you up. You don't know what's going on anyway. I mean, even now, on the one hand it's a ches, on the other hand it's not. People don't even experience the day of death too much anymore. And that's not such a great thing either. That's not such a good thing. First of all, real tzaddikim, they don't need any medications. The real tzaddikim, their souls and minds are beyond their bodies. Right? People who aren't tzaddikim, who really need to do some powerful charot at the end of their life, so so now things, they shouldn't be in any pain. Okay, I thank God I have no idea what that pain is like, and I'm not blaming people who don't want to have that pain. And I can understand why doctors would want to alleviate the pain, and there's a certain chesed attributed to that. But if you're so drugged up that you don't even know that you're alive, and you don't feel that, you don't have the time to feel this immense regret. It used to be a much more common thing. You did vidui at somebody's bed, a confession to their bed before they died. Like what happened 200 years ago? I imagine, I don't know. People who died 200 years ago, they didn't even know why they were dying. They just knew they're getting old. Who would say that wasn't cancer then? I don't know. And they say people were sickly, and they were ill, and they were this, and they were feeling terrible, and they were in pain. You don't think they died not in pain 200 years ago? I think everybody says, okay, I'm dying, everything's fine. They didn't have any painkillers then. You don't think there were, livers and lungs and hearts that, shut down and they were struggling to breathe? I mean, I don't get it. For thousands of years, people died painfully. Somehow the world continued. I'm not saying we shouldn't alleviate the pain. I'm not saying, but I'm just saying people died naturally. Meaning to say, they knew they were dying, and then there was the opportunity to say vidui. And you waited till the day of death. And that's a very powerful thing. To say vidui on the day of death is a very important thing. Nowadays, it doesn't happen so often. Because, the doctors can prolong their lives and this and that, and then, it could be another couple of weeks and a couple of months. Are they still conscious? Are they lucid? Are they not? And then, you do it, and it winds up being a year before they die, and then when they do die, it slips by too quickly, and then, so, you lose that a lot of times. You don't have the rabbi to do the final confession. It doesn't always happen, unfortunately, because of all this medical technology. So we kind of lose that day of death. Day of death's not going to be so bad anymore. When it gets to the point where it hurts me, they'll drug me up and finished. So there isn't even so much the day of death anymore. So we really have to visualize what is this day of death, and how painful, not physically, but spiritually, how painful, how much regret a person would have on their wasted life, and how they wish things would have been different. And that's the only true regret you really ever have in your life, without your effort. You don't have to do anything, and you'll have a real, true regret, unless your mom is so drugged out and in another world. But you'll have a true regret. So now, if you can visualize that now, then it can put things in the right perspective. And which we said before, normally when you have regret, you're already thinking in your baser nature how to do the next Aveira. So he's saying if you would contemplate the day of death now, that's what he's saying, this very base act that you now contemplate will pass through your memory on your last day if you do it. Then how much will you regret having done it? How much torment and anguish will you have? So bring that undesired future experience into the present as a deterrent to baser behavior. So he's saying it is a deterrent to baser behavior. That's to stop you from doing Avera. Certainly that will also be in helping you with a genuine charata. If you want to have a genuine charata, so you won't, because the truth is, even as we're having the charata, you're sitting down on Elul and have a little charata, but you know those instincts, those natures, that baser nature is there, and you're thinking about it. And therefore you've got to bring in that day of death to become the extremely powerful tool to make sure that regret happens. Because otherwise, I don't know how many people really regret. It's a world that regret is much not in vogue. I don't think people really think that. I don't know, regret, maybe I could have been a little better. But real regret, it's very hard to have nowadays. And that's why the Teshuva is so hard to do. Okay, let's finish up the last two lines. This concept that we explained, this is what the prophet Jeremiah said. The woes upon the people of Einish Nicham al Rasol Lemor Me'asisi. There isn't a person who regrets on his evil, and he says, Me'asisi, what have I done? What have I done already? Right? Those people don't even, what have I done? What's so bad? Much better than the other guys. I'm a Jew. I'm a religious Jew. I'm so much better than everybody else. So that's what the Navi says. So really, if you think about it, what is this charata? How can we have this charata in a more realistic and more pleasant way? What you really see from Rabbi Yonah, if you're really reading carefully, he's saying that charata is built and based on the greatness of man, not on the lowliness of man. Were the human being not to have great potential, then man wouldn't have all these great bridges to connect him to Hashem. Then, there can't be that so much authentic regret in the sense that Rabbi Yonah is describing. Regret is not where you say, I was supposed to do this, this is what I was right to do, and I didn't do what was right to do, and I'm sorry that I didn't do what was right to do. That's not the real regret we're talking about, but it's really a much deeper thing than that. It's not the mechanism of, I had to do it, I had an obligation to do it, I didn't do it, now someone's going to be angry with me. That's not the mentality of charata. The mentality of charata evolves out of understanding of the greatness of the human potential and the wasted human potential. That's what charata is based on. The fact that I'm a living creature with abilities, both physical and spiritual, and I have so much that was given to me, and I could have done so much, and I didn't care for it. And I never used it in the way that I was supposed to use it. That's a much different angle, and that's so important. Because when the charata comes from acknowledging the greatness that you have, and charata is built out of the greatness of man, as Rabbi Yonah is describing, then there's a dramatic difference between this feeling and the feeling of depression. Otherwise, you can be a depressed person. So, okay, time's up. So, Misham, tomorrow, on Monday, we'll just finish up this last point, and then we'll move on to the second step of leaving the sin. Okay, have a good Shabbos, everybody.